All right, we're back on this. Another one. Enough people have said that I should keep going, so I'm going to keep reacting to this Quine video. I figure I at least got to get through this one conversation with Quine and Dennett and Martin Davies and Paul Horwich. I think where we left off last time, we were just about to segue into a question asked by Dennett. And I have noticed that my audio is messed up for some reason. OBS was working fine. I just updated everything, and it seems like now something's messed up. It's like, okay, you can't win with this over here. But well, I just realized who disliked this video. The haters, dude. Haters, man. You gotta dislike a Quine video. Rough stuff. All right.
Are true, and I think you think they're true, and
Let's go back a little
truth
bit.
is all the truth there is.
Yes, I think I do, but
That's in the modern days. I think that we didn't talk about this last time, but they're talking about scientism. That science gives us access to all the truths that there are.
the kind of thing that's made life easier in many ways and harder in many ways, and has made for technology. There's the situation, and then we come to our idiom in describing what's going on here, and our idiom just happens to have this curious twist in it that we talk about something having been supposed true but not having been true, rather than talking of something as having been true and no longer being true.
Could I just ask, before we go on to the next question, if the Peirce idea had worked out, that would have only been an account of scientific truth. Do you think scientific truth is all the truth there is?
Yes, I think I do, but I think I cheat here by putting so much into science, including mathematics. There's another boundary that I tend to blur between mathematics and natural science. And then as for values, well, I just hesitate to use the term true there. Things are better and worse from one point of view or another.
Now, here are some...
That's where we ended last time, and that's where I was saying I ain't rocking with that. It's a fun fact for anyone who cares. When I wrote my dissertation way back in the dinosaur ages, I wrote it defending a kind of hybrid or mixed theory of moral statements or judgments, whereby when you say that something is wrong, you express an emotion about that thing, like a moral emotion of condemnation or approbation, approval or disapproval, an emotional sense of oh, dude, no, or like, yay. But also the belief that that's the right way to react. That's the correct response to have to the thing in question. So then I think you can justify the belief. So the emotional response may be, it's just an emotional response, but can you justify that that's the right one to have? Yeah, I think you can. And then you'll get your theory about that. I think we believe that that's the right one to have, right? That when we say something is wrong, what we're saying is, I condemn that, and that's the right way to respond to it. And then that second part is the belief that can be justified or not, whereas the emotional thing is, the emotional thing. Okay, anyway, so that's my way of trying to get the kind of point that he's taking here seriously, which is I do think there's this kind of emotional component to moral judgments, and that when you say X is wrong, you are expressing an emotion, but that's not all you're doing, in my view. But I wouldn't say, so therefore I would say that moral judgments can be true under the analysis that I defended, even though they have this emotional component. They have a belief component as well, which can be true, a belief about the emotion. Anyway.
Of yours, which I think are true, and I think you think they're true, and maybe they're scientific truths. It's about consciousness. You say, if we repudiate...
Did my man just say consciousness up in here? Yeah. Yeah, I thought we were talking about meaning and intentionality. All right. Boop. Let me turn on my consciousness ears. Do I act this way around other people? I don't even know anymore. I've been in this room for so long. I feel this is how I am now. People who have known me from before, was I always like this? Don't fucking say yes, you asshole. Just kidding. All right. Consciousness. Oh, I'm excited.
Mental entities as entities. There ceases to be an iron curtain between the private and the public.
Wait. Go back.
Well, I just hesitate to use the note.
No, what did I do?
It's about consciousness.
There
You
we
say,
go.
if we repudiate mental entities as entities, there ceases to be an iron curtain between the private and the public. There remains only a smokescreen, a matter of varying degrees of privacy of events in the physical world. Consciousness still retains a place as a state of a physical object if we construe consciousness as a faculty of responding to one's own responses. Now, that's an absolutely crystal clear and forthright statement of up-to-the-minute materialism.
All right, crystal clear and forthright. Brah. All right, let's get it. So interesting. It almost sounded like he was saying something about higher order reactions to our own states, some kind of higher order account of consciousness there. Let me just hear that again.
Clear and forthright statement of up-to-the-minute materialism as a state of a physical.
All right.
We repudiate mental entities as entities.
Let's go back here.
Of
Hold on.
yours, which I think are true, and I think you think they're true, and maybe they're scientific truths. It's about consciousness. You say, if we repudiate mental entities as entities.
All right, so if we repudiate mental entities as entities, what is he reading from there right there anyway? Does anyone know? Is this a word and object? Is that, I can't tell, but which Quine is that? So anyway, so if we repudiate mental entities as entities, so that's the sense data stuff right there, right? So if you think when you're having a red experience that there must be something which is red, right? Because you're having a red experience, the experience is presenting like a red object in the environment or something like that. And so the sense data guys think, well, there's got to be something that's red around. But then there's illusions and hallucinations, and you have the same red experience, but there's nothing in the world out there. So yikes, which red thing is there now? In the hallucination case, there's got to be a red thing, because we just already established that, they think. So the red thing must be a sense datum, something out there that's like an object, a mental object, which comes before the mind or something like that. So the quote here is saying, if we repudiate that view, right, we get rid of that idea, then we erase this this hard and fast distinction between public and private, inner and outer. You can kind of see, I think, a theme in Quine's work, that he doesn't like these dichotomies. He's always looking for a way to see gradations and continuations. Something I think which Dennett has carried on. Dan has carried on in his own work, this kind of idea. But let him finish the quote anyway.
There ceases to be an iron curtain between the private and the public.
That's the iron curtain. Colorful 80s way of referring to a hard and fast division between these two things, the private and the public. And this, I was thinking about this last time too, because after I was doing the reaction video for the last video, I was thinking that some of the things that Quine was saying were reminding me of so like, in a way, themes that are related to like the private language argument that comes from Wittgenstein. So the basic idea is that, yesterday, you guys, it doesn't matter when you're watching this, in the last video, when Quine was talking about how you acquire these concepts, because he was saying, like, even pain and joy and stuff, we acquire that from watching people out there. And you might have thought, no, in the first instance, we acquire them from the inside, right? From having our own experiences, getting the concepts of pain, and then working our way out to other people's. And Quine seemed to be saying, no, we start in the other way. And I said, that's an interesting view in philosophy and so forth and so on. But I think it's kind of interesting because, well, so if you think about the work of David Chalmers, he wants to distinguish like different concepts that we might have of like a pain. So there's some concepts that are like social concepts, like what people around me, what the social meaning of it is, like, we call grass green and stuff like that. Then there's the kind of demonstrative concept where I say I'm having this experience, but then there's like a pure, a kind of something that picks it out as a kind of experience that it is, which doesn't depend on these other things or somehow separate from them. But Quine here seems to be suggesting that we can't make this kind of distinction without thinking of this thing that I have as like an object. And I'm not sure I buy that, to be honest with you, since I do like the first person. And I do like, I think this is one of the areas where I depart from this way of doing philosophy. Anyway, okay, so let's hear the rest of the question and then what Quine's going to say.
There remains only a smokescreen, a matter of varying degrees of privacy of events in the physical.
So a matter of varying degrees, that's the gradation. This is an analogy that I heard David Rosenthal use once to try to get, I think, a point like, he's a Quinean, basically. Like foaming at the mouth, rabid, hardcore type. And so his analogy was like, like your social security number. You know your social security number, and I know my social security number. And I know my social security number in a way that you don't know yours or whatever, so your phone number or whatever, some private information. But it's not private in some metaphysical, deep, subjective, only existing from your point of view sort of thing. It's private in the sense that it's relatively harder for me to get to it. You have a special kind of access to it, but it's not a super special metaphysical kind of access. It's just that, you have a special relation to it. Okay, so maybe conscious experiences like that. And you do have first person access to it. No one's denying that. Quine's not here. I don't think he's going to be denying that. But it's just like, like the kind of access you have, but more limited. It's more not limited, but more selective. Only I get to employ those methods or something. I don't know. So does that capture the sense in which conscious experience seems to be subjective, ineffable, and private, which, Dennett has spent a lot of time arguing that this is a misnotion or something like that. But anyway, so I think that's where we're going with this. But I know I'm talking about Zoop.
World. Consciousness still retains a place as a state of a physical object if we construe consciousness as a faculty of responding to one's own responses.
So he says consciousness is a real physical thing if we construe it as a response to our own responses. Okay. So Quine's not an illusionist, or wouldn't have been an illusionist, it sounds like, is what he's saying. Maybe I'm wrong about that, so let's continue.
That's an absolutely crystal clear and forthright statement of up-to-the-minute materialism, but you said this back in 1952. You were more than a decade ahead of J.J.C. Smart and the Australian materialists in announcing your allegiance to materialism. But back in the 50s, if you went and looked to see what the neurophysiologists thought, they weren't at all convinced that materialism was true.
Yeah.
So is this part of your flexible definition of science, that this is a scientific truth that coming from, say, an epistemologist, where your epistemological avenue to this truth lets you get out ahead of science and the rest of science in this way?
What did I just do? So wait, I just muted this somehow. So wait, what was Dennett's question? So he's saying, so Quine was endorsing, excuse me, Quine was endorsing a version of materialism in the 50s before SMART was. SMART, our sensations and brain process or something like that was what, 60? Is he saying 62 or something? Is that when that came out? When did Herbert Feigel's The Mental and the Physical come out? Wasn't there something in the 50s? Anyway, so I don't know. I'd have to look that stuff up to get the exact dates right. Hey Siri, when did Herbert Feigel's The Mental and the Physical get published? Let's see if Siri knows, guys.
Okay. So when did Herbert Feigel's The Mental and
Feigl?
Physical get published? Check it out.
She didn't read it to me. Come on, 1967. Okay, so yeah, that was later than I thought. Nothing in the 50s, huh? Even Armstrong was okay. Anyway, so I should look up the dates, but so what he's saying is that Quine was talking about it's like consciousness being a kind of brain activity before philosophers were, but also before scientists were. Before neuroscientists were. Therefore, Quine's epistemology must be good for doing science because it came up with something that science thinks is true before the scientists did. Is that Dennett's idea? I'm not saying I agree with him. I'm just trying to figure out, is that what he was saying just there? I think that's what he's saying. So let's see Quine's response. He seems to be processing.
I think this may be that the neurologists in those days weren't being as critically philosophical as they might have been, but it's the same domain, the same sort of truth.
So that, in effect, here was a case where a philosopher, reflecting on what had to be, I mean, you had some good reasons for your materialism, could advance the truth in this area ahead of the laborers in the field, the neuroscientists who...
Is that the way we think about what's going on there, though? Is that the right way to think about what's going on there? Let me say that again for dramatic effect. Is that the right way to think about what's going on? I am ridiculous. Look, okay, so come on now. Is that the right way? So Quine says hamada, yamada, blamada, materialism. Okay. Philosopher Z says hamada, yamada, blamada, German idealism. Science goes one way. Philosopher A says, oh, I guess I was good for science. That doesn't seem right. It seems like science could have gone either way. It just so happens Quine was sort of saying these things. Maybe he was, had some insights or something like that. But why should we think that this is evidence that his philosophy is having some deep insights? That's... I don't think the scientists... Well, did Quine's argument play any role on the scientists? I don't think so. I think, if anything, what convinced scientists of materialism was just coming to understand the physiology and the mechanisms of simple systems in more detail. It's hard to look at the neural circuitry that controls the sea slug's behavior and think, oh yeah, we need some kind of non-physical stuff in here doing things. It's hard to look at the neural circuitry for a crab claw opening and shutting and think, oh gee, there's got to be some non-physical cause that completes this circuit. And I think that generally, that line of argument extended up through humans is what has convinced neuroscientists, if they are convinced. Some of them aren't. I mean, it's hard because neuroscience was barely just becoming a discipline in 1950. When was the first neuroscience department founded? In the 50s, I assume. 60s, maybe. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd have to look that up. Once again, preparation. I should prepare for these things? Unheard of. Blasphemy. Let's see what he said.
Who were looking at the neurons themselves.
Well, apparently so. Of course, you know the history of that as I don't. But surely back in '52, there were others, even scientists, who did see things pretty much this way. Well, of course,
okay.
there were, and had long since been John B. Watson and fairly long since B.F. Skinner. And I think this would chime in with them, their views.
Of course, a lot of the antipathy to this frankly materialistic view of consciousness was summed up by Ryle.
I mean, I think that actually this is one of those areas where physicalism of this age, of that age, did itself a disservice by aligning itself with behaviorism and by not emphasizing enough, in my view, that this was not a complete account. I mean, it's surprising how far you can get with behavior. That's one of the points we were making last time. You can get pretty far, and we rely on it extensively. Go and tell some average person on the street that the dog doesn't feel pain when you kick it, and they'll think you're out of your mind, most likely. But their entire reason for thinking that is based on extensive observation of behavior of these animals and other people. So you can get pretty far with behavior, but it doesn't get you all the way. There's got to be something. And then obviously behaviorism ultimately, I think, is false, and internal processes do matter to understanding how behaviors are produced in the mind and so forth. So and all that sort of stuff. But physicalism, I have always thought of Quine here as, not here, but I mean in that time, as saying, look, we can make sense of the world as being physical, and while we don't have a complete picture yet, we can make progress on it. And look, here's behaviorism, and it's making all this cool progress, and a theory like this is, the best. Something like this ultimately has got to be the best we can do, especially with respect to language and stuff like that. But so anyway, so I always thought of him as using this as an example. It's like, if you were going around saying, for example, we could take this, and then what's wrong? We could use this as a theory, and you say, okay, but doesn't mean he thinks it's true necessarily. Although he did say last time he was willing to accept it was true down the line, but doesn't mean that he thinks that it, at the end, the final story or something like that. Yeah. I always saw that, again, this is kind of a methodological claim. I thought, like, as I understood it, we were talking about this last time again, the claim being that if you want to understand something or study it, you study the behavior. And that's the sense in which he hooks up with behaviorism. And to a large extent, I still think that's right. So if you want to study fear in a rat, you have to define fear as in a way that can be observed or measured, and that's usually done in terms of the animal's behavior. That's one of the problems, of course, with doing that. And then we sort of go, okay, well, so they have the same behavior. Do they have the same experience? Probably they don't have the same experience, obviously, but do they have any experience at all? Well, I would say, yeah. I'm getting distracted. Let's not go down the rabbit hole of that. But the point is, I always thought that the physicalists did disservice by marrying themselves so strongly to behaviorism, as opposed to just sort of emphasizing that this is an example, this is what current science is saying, but it's going to change. And in fact, it did change. The cognitive revolution came. And in fact, it's changed since then. The cognitive neuroscience revolution came. And even Dennett has admitted, in my opinion, has admitted recently that, just doing the cognitive stuff, information processing, blah, 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 isn't enough. You need to look at the details of how it's implemented. And the details matter. in terms of this implementation. So anyway, I don't really see, physicalism as necessitating some kind of behavioralist approach. Obviously, it doesn't. I don't even think physicalism necessitates an illusionistic approach or something like that. So I can think you can be fully realist about consciousness. That's what people who know me well know. Anyway, let's get back to it.
The concept of mind in 1949 as the doctrine of the ghost and the machine, which he also criticized. And in the notorious first chapter of
Wait,
the
hold on. Let's go back a little bit.
See things pretty much this way. Well, of course, there were, and had long since been John B. Watson and fairly long since B.F. Skinner.
Yeah, okay. So by the way, also we forgot to mention that what he's saying here is Dennett saying, look, isn't this a case where the philosopher was ahead of the scientist? And he's saying no, because these guys in psychology, maybe ahead of a certain brain scientists or something like that, or scientists generally, but there were some scientists. And of course, that's what you expect. It's like, early psychologists, lots of them were panpsychists and stuff like that. And some still are. The consensus in the field has shifted over time, but I think largely for the reasons that we've already been given, that as we seek to explain the behavior of humans, which we haven't done very well, but we seek to explain it scientifically, and other animals as well, what we see is that we can give explanations or seemingly sketch explanations for simpler animals that don't involve any non-physical substances. And we never find anywhere in our causal explanations where we would expect a physical cause to be where there isn't one. And so it's extrapolating from that, I think, that gives us confidence that if scientists are confident in physicalism, I think it would be for those sorts of reasons, as opposed to the kind of totally abstract philosophical considerations that Quine is here invoking. But obviously, physicalism is a philosophical view, and if scientists hold this view, then they must have sort of engaged in some kind of quasi-philosophical reasoning or something like that to get to that view, right? So, and I think that fits with everything that we're saying here. But yeah, I think that Dennett's not agreeing, Quine's not agreeing with Dennett's claim about I don't think he's agreeing with the claim that he got ahead of the scientists.
And I think this would chime in with their views.
Of course, a lot of the antipathy to this frankly materialistic view of consciousness was summed up by Ryle in the concept of mind in 1949 as the doctrine of the ghost and the machine, which he also criticized. And in the notorious first chapter of the concept of...
So if you guys don't know about the notorious first chapter of The Concept of Mind by Gilbert Ryle, it's a great thing. It's still relevant. I think people should read more than that. I think that's one of the problems, is that people read that first chapter. I'm not a big Ryle scholar, but I've read the book. And there's a lot. He's a pretty subtle guy. He's a pretty smart guy. There's a video on YouTube, too, of Ryle having a conversation. I was thinking about reacting to things like that. Maybe people care about that stuff. Anyway, so... yeah, the ghost and the machine, there's, I don't know. So I think that this idea is pretty interesting, actually, and you can take it in various ways. So here's the way that I take Ryle's idea. So you have to go back, you have to rewind to like Descartes times, in the 17th century, 1600s, and you have to, pre-Newton, in other words, pre-Newton. And you have to sort of understand that at this time, there was a conception of the world as a machine, as a mechanism, where mechanisms, are very precise sort of structures which they had been building physically. And they involved gears and pulleys and levers and, think of mills and, giant clock towers and all the mechanical parts in there, everything connected to everything else, and so forth and so on. So mechanisms, like real mechanisms, like in old, like analog watches. So, and there was this conception of the world as a mechanism like that, but on a grander scale, made by a grander designer, of course, that being the ultimate designer in their mind, God. Not everyone accepted that, obviously, but that was a general world picture that was being developed by the physical sciences at the time. That there was this kind of, that the world was mechanical. Now, of course, as it is well known, the mind doesn't fit naturally into that picture. And so the history of this is, you can tell it in various ways, but the sort of version of it that I like is you have this ongoing quest to mathematize physics, starting with Galileo and others earlier, obviously, but really gets going at this time. And then Descartes comes along and it culminates in Newton, and then with us it even further is mathematized, but that's sort of a familiar trajectory. And so what Ryle thinks happened, as far as I'm reconstructing this stuff, remember, it's my interpretation of Ryle. What happens is we have this mechanical view of the world. The mind doesn't fit into that, so they postulate it to exist as a non-physical substance. Not everyone accepts that. There's Hobbes and there's other physicalists at this time. But anyway, so there's this picture that the mind is this non-physical substance, but they picture it as a substance, as something that's going to be, in other words, subject to a mechanistic interpretation. It's going to be a kind of mechanism, but a non-physical mechanism. So the machine now is the body, obviously, and the ghost is the non-physical bit in there. But we end up saying all sorts of weird things about it because we think of it as an object, and so we end up saying the sort of canonical view here of the ghost and the machine then leads us with some very puzzling results. One problem about the problem of other minds, how do we know that there are other minds out there, that other people have minds and they're just zombies or robots or something? And then the problem of mental causation, how does the mind interact with the physical body? And then, of course, you get the well-known idea of Ryle's category mistake, right? So if you describe the behavior, you say, well, what is a belief? Well, believing X is to behave in various ways or be disposed and to behave in various ways. And people say, but where's the belief? And Ryle comes along and says, that's a category mistake. That's like me taking you to the college and saying building A, building B, building C, and you saying, but where's the college? You say, but that is the college. I just showed it to you. It's people doing stuff in those buildings. So part of the argument for physicalism that Ryle is developing here is an argument from intractable philosophical puzzle. It's just, Descartes' view that there's a non-physical substance results in all these problems that we can't see our way out of. And so the way to move forward is to reconceptualize the mind as being a physical thing. Now, I don't think it's right to conceptualize being behavior, and you can't get definitional reductions from statements about mental things to statements about behavior for most of anything. Maybe in a few cases, I think maybe, but not most of anything. Anyway, let's hear what Quine has to say about all this stuff.
Ryle says that it's a category mistake. He introduces this term of a category mistake to say that there's minds on the one hand and brains on the other hand. And he went to some length, not by any...
Notice what notice what Dennett just did right there. He said that it's a category mistake to say that there's minds on the one hand and brains on the other hand, whereas Ryle's usually interpreted as saying that it's a category and a mistake to say that there's minds on the one hand and behavior on the other hand.
Standard successful lengths of telling us what a category mistake is, but it has to do, he said, with different meanings of the word exist, different senses of existence. Now, you came along shortly thereafter with your doctrine that to be is to be the value of a bound variable. This was your way of treating the notion of existence.
Yeah, so that's an important point, by the way, in Quine's philosophy, coming from on what there is, I think. So that the basic idea is that this might relate to the pragmatism too, that what exists is relative to a theory, and that you can't just say what exists independently of having a theory. And so to have existence is to be the value of a bound variable. It's to be, so, suppose I have a description. Santa Claus is a jolly person who wears a red suit and magically brings presents to kids on December 25th. And then I can turn that into kind of a logical description. There is an object X that satisfies the following description. X is a jolly individual who lives at the North Pole, magically bringing blah, 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 kids, presents, hamada, hamada. And if there is a Santa Claus, then that object that is Santa Claus is the thing which satisfies the description in that thing that I just said. There is an X such that X is a jolly blah, blah, blah. So when he says it's to be the value of a bound variable, that's what he means. If you have this object, if you exist, then there's a quantified description that you satisfy. This kind of goes to another point of Quine, a sort of technical logical point, but it's interesting, which was that he thought that if you were going to formulate logic, like first order propositional logic, that you can't have constants in there, because you get yourself like where you say A stands for that guy Albert over there, and you say Albert is tall, and you symbolize that as saying here's a predicate T, and here's the lowercase letter A that stands for Albert. That's a constant. This is a predicate letter. You have T A. So Quine thinks no, you have to have everything done in terms of variables, and to exist is just for there to be some quantified description that you satisfy, right? So numbers exist because we can say there is an X such that, X plus 1 equals 5. So 4 satisfies that description. So 4 has got to exist. Of course, he's a physicalist. He doesn't think they're abstract objects, but so he thinks that this is kind of, the way you talk about existence, and even names and other things, that's what I was just saying, even names and other things which you normally think of as being treated logically as constants have to be treated as descriptions. He even invents this really weird notion. So if you say you have a Pegasus, for example, how can you say Pegasus is tall? Well, you have to say, he says, you can invent a predicate called Pegasizing. Say, there exists an X such that X Pegasizes. I mean, this is one of the points that I think that people that are really good at logic make a lot of that they make, which I think is good for us to hear. People like Quine make this point. Ramsey made this point a lot. Kripke has made points, not the same point, but similar ones. So Ramsey, I remember, Ramsey was a genius. He died too early, obviously. It was really sad, but F.P. Ramsey, is that his name? F.P.? Is that what it is? I don't know. Anyway. But, there's a whole big debate about, take a sentence like, dogs are mammals. You have the subject and you have the predicate. And so, does this tell us a clue about the nature of reality? Are there substances that have properties? And Ramsey comes along and says, well, for any subject predicate sentence you have, you just switch it around. Come up with a grammatical construction where what was the predicate is now the subject. Mammals as a group contains dogs or something. So, now what? So a lot of these things that we think of as really important you can see that they're, we make them. These are constructions that are, Kripke has this footnote where he says all of these things are conventions, and whichever ones are useful. So it's like, formulate this way, it's useful, and blah blah blah. So anyway, enough of me flapping. Let's get back to this. Holy moly, I like to flap, don't I? We're only at an hour and 5. I thought we were going to make it through least half an hour of this video today.
Do you see that your doctrine of to be is to be the value of a bound variable, was this an alternative to Ryle's idea about existence, or was it a way of rendering formal and clear what Ryle was groping for all along? What do you think?
No, certainly it wasn't in tune at all with Ryle's notion of categories. In fact, somewhere, perhaps in Word and Object, I came out against exactly that, namely Ryle's notion of there being different senses of existence. Where do we draw the line? For me, there is simply a general idiom that applies all over the place. You would apply it to numbers and concrete objects, and all on equal footing. It's all a question of whether you're going to use them as well. One way of putting it as objects of relative pronouns, or the mathematical analog of those is the variable, the bound variable. When you say everything is thus and so, when I say it, I'm including numbers and everything there is, of course.
And when somebody else says what they think there is, somebody else speaks, and we can see what that person's ontology is. Suppose it doesn't agree with yours. Suppose there's a difference. Is there a final objective arbiter of what there is, of ontology?
Yeah, right. So you say there are ghosts and someone says there are no ghosts. So how do you decide that? Or if, when it comes to, theories in science, one theory says there is dark matter, another theory says there isn't. So one theory says there's modified gravity, another theory says there isn't. So how do we know what really exists is the point here. You might think if you're really hardcore, you might think, gee, it's just a matter of convention. And some people have taken Quine's arguments to point in that direction. Like if really reference is inscrutable and you can have different translation manuals that are equally the same, but they have different ontological backgrounds or metaphysical assumptions about reality, then what does that tell us about reality? Is there any way that it is independently of our categorizations of it and so forth? So, yeah, okay, let's continue. I'm not going to just, I can't. It's so hard for me to shut up. Okay, let's go.
Of what terms refer to? Can we solve that problem of metaphysics and say this is what there is?
Oh no! Did he just say what terms refer to Quine? I mean, he is an extensionalist, right? But all right, hold on. Let's hear this again.
Final objective arbiter of what there is, of ontology, of what terms refer to? Can we solve that problem of metaphysics and say this is what there is?
I see it as a matter of the best, most satisfactory, clear, clean-cut, economical system we can set up that accommodates all of science as we see it, and I see it as changeable, revisable, like the rest of science. That it's just the question of what there is simply a part of science. Reality is a scientific term, as I think of it.
But one of your extensions...
So hold on now. Reality is a scientific term as I think of it. As opposed to what? Scientific terms. So reality is something that we learn about by doing science. That's something that we can know about a priori or deduce the nature of by conceptual analysis or something like that. I take it as what he's saying. So ultimately what exists is an endeavor for science. But if you have two theories that describe the world equally well, but postulate different things in the world, then what do you do? Is that Dennett's question, or is Dennett's question just like the one I started out saying? You believe in ghosts and I don't. What, you thought I was going to believe in ghosts? You believe in ghosts and I don't. Is it like that, or is it like we have different theories, like string theory and quantum loop gravity, and we want to know ultimately how the world really is? I mean, and there were things like this at that time because quantum mechanics was giving us examples where you could have descriptions of the world that were equivalent but said very different things, like that the particle took every pathway between here and there, which I think is kind of Feynman's, like it sums over the histories of it or something like that. Or you could represent it in a different way. Anyway, so there were examples of this from the science of the time. So anyway, yeah, I wonder what, yeah, hold on. So I want to see how this develops.
Or elaborations of your idea of the indeterminacy of radical translation is the idea of indeterminacy of reference.
Yeah.
How can we tell if two people actually are agreeing in the reference of their...
Very good.
Okay, so that's a different question. So how do we know we're agreeing on the reference? So yeah, how do we, if I say there are ghosts and you say there are no ghosts, how do we know we're referring to the same thing? Because it's indeterminate what ghost refers to. Is that Dennis' question? All right, let's hear our Quine's response.
And yes, I'm glad you bring this up because a nice thing about my doctrine of indeterminacy of reference is that unlike my speculation on indeterminacy of radical translation of sentences, and that applies primarily to sentences, not words only derivatively, indeterminacy or inscrutability of reference is trivial and is incontestable.
Look at this face. Trivial and incontestable. Bah, bah. Wow, man. Inscrutability of reference is trivial and incontestable. Doof. It's interesting because this scrutability stuff has come back hardcore. Chalmers' book, Constructing the World, which we were talking about last time, sort of his neo-Carnapian story, that revising the Canberra plan, which is the new version of the Aufbrach. Anyway, so that's a joke, right? I know what he's going to say. It's unavoidable, right? You can't get out of it because inscrutability of reference is well, let me see what he's going to say.
Here's the consideration.
Okay.
Consider any one-to-one reinterpretation of everything that there is. For instance, if this is applying to, insofar as it applies to creatures, animals and other physical objects in the space-time, you might associate arbitrarily with each cat just the rest of the cosmos, minus the cat. Everything, the cosmic complement. And if you reinterpret all your nouns and verbs, all your predicates, as being true of the, in this case, of the cosmic complements, of the thing that they were true of, that we ordinarily think of them as true, do that systematically, all the sentences still come out true, and all the scientific evidence for them comes out true, because...
Wait, what? So I take my term, I think in terms of thought. So, but I guess you can think of the term cat. So you take cat. I'm going to say there's a causal historical link to the group of cats. Picks out a natural kind. So now he says take the cosmic complement, flip it around so that it refers to everything except cats. So now I say all cats are mammals, but you do the same thing with mammals, right? So you take the cats and you flip it. So now it refers to everything except not cats, not the cats, right? You take mammals and you flip that too. So you get, it refers to everything except mammals. And then you say, and then basically all cats are mammals. Turns out to be all non-cats are non-mammals. But that's false, because dogs are non-cats that are mammals. Am I misunderstanding you? Okay, let's go. Tell us, what's the solution? Why? How did I mess up?
Take a sentence such as cats are carnivores.
Okay.
The reinterpretation makes those words, cats are carnivores, mean cosmic complements of cats are cosmic complements of carnivores. What's the difference?
Cosmic complements of cats are cosmic complements of carnivores. So that's not the way I said it. I said non-cats are non-carnivores. So how did I misunderstand cosmic complement? Cosmic complement was, let's go back.
For instance, if this is applying to, insofar as it applies to creatures, animals and other physical objects in the space-time, you might associate arbitrarily with each cat just the rest of the cosmos, minus the cat. Everything, the cosmic complement.
Okay, so it's not all the things which are not cats. It's the rest of the cosmos minus just one cat, that particular cat. So let's name the cat George. So the cosmic complement of George is the cosmos minus George. Okay. The cosmic complement of carnivores is the universe minus all carnivores, or just George? Because then you get the universe minus George is the universe minus carnivores? No, it's minus a carnivore. So how do you do the cosmic complement for carnivores? Is he going to tell me that? It's an interesting argument. Okay, so let's go back and see if we can get it this time.
And if you reinterpret all your nouns and verbs, all your predicates, as being true of the...
Oh wait, all your nouns and verbs. So I have to interpret are too that way? No. Is are the cosmic complement of are? Okay, hold on.
As this case of the cosmic complements of the thing that they were true of, that we ordinarily think of them as true of. Do that systematically.
Look, he's excited. He thinks he's got something here. Fucking Quine. Okay.
All the sentences still come out true, and all the scientific evidence for them comes out true, because take a sentence such as cats are carnivores. The reinterpretation makes those words, cats are carnivores, mean cosmic complements of cats are cosmic complements of carnivores. What's the difference?
I mean, the difference is the sets are different, unless I'm misinterpreting how cosmic complements of carnivores is determined, right?
Those are equivalent. It's essential here that we say, as I did, one-to-one correspondence, which cosmic complement fulfills, because it isn't always that when...
So it's this cat George and this particular instance of carnivorism. So the universe minus George is the universe minus this particular bit of carnivorism. I mean, this to me is where teleological, causal, historical kinds of considerations come into play, because whatever your case, so let's take that. So, all right. But if the mental item that gets caused or tokened in virtue of looking at George, the carnivorous cat, has the function of representing George and not the cosmic complement of George, then no problem. And probably representing cosmic complements of George, the universe minus George, aren't very good for escaping, right? So you don't get the same behaviors, you get the same truth values, but or is he saying get the same behavior? Oh man, okay, Quine, dude, give me a headache here. So we're only at an hour and 10.
This, you get correspondence. For instance, there are mothers of lawyers.
Wait, what's going on? Mothers of lawyers. What's he talking about?
There are mothers who meet complements of carnivores. What's the difference? Those are equivalent. It's essential here that we say, as I did one-to-one correspondence, which cosmic complement fulfills, because it isn't always that when you do this, you get correspondence. For instance, there are mothers of lawyers. Well, a man doesn't have to be a lawyer in order that the man's mother be the mother of a lawyer, because he may have siblings. It's in that way that this could break down. So it's essential to say one-to-one, but cosmic complements one-to-one, and all sorts of arbitrary correlations are just as good as others. So when we take this into consideration...
Well, just as good as others, right? Arbitrary correlation. So this is going to be a problem for certain theories of intentionality, I think, right? But this is, I think this is going to be something that a theory of intentionality is going to have to say something about, but it doesn't seem to me to be really a problem that can't be overcome, right?
I don't see what sense there is in wondering what somebody's talking about. We just take the simplest line and say, yes, he's talking about cats, not cosmic complements.
We just take the simplest line. He's talking about cats, not cosmic complements, man. Why? How do you know that? Because I don't know. I'm lazy. What? This is, I mean, so for me, remember, I am not really much of a, certain parts of me I have sympathy towards Quinian views. There's a large part of me, though, I'm like, come on, dude. So here's one of those places. I'm like, come on, dude. This is what the whole story that Kripke kind of tells is trying to get at, I think. I wonder if they're going to ask him about Kripke in here, because he should know about that stuff by this time, what we say last time, 94. So how do you do this thing on Kripke's story? Well, the simplified version is that, there's some people hanging out, they see an animal, or let's make it simpler. They come across a pond or some stuff in there, they point at it and they say water. And so they sort of intend to name that stuff water. That's the baptism part in Kripke's story. There's an intention on the part of the speaker to use this term to refer to that kind of stuff, right? Stuff like that over there, the stuff that we find over there. And then maybe there's more to it, like it becomes useful. Like it's, that stuff that we get out of there and we use to wash our clothes and take baths in and so forth, water the crops. But it initially, and so the word water, the concept water, the thought water, whatever, traces back to the stuff because originally we intended to use it that way to name a stuff. And then when someone comes around and says, oh, we call that water, we then pick up, that's kind of the reference borrowing. They pass on to us the ability to refer to the stuff. Because we intend to use the word in the way they gave it to us, generally speaking. So that this kind of chain, this is how I end up referring to Socrates, the actual historical philosopher, not his next door neighbor, when I say the word Socrates, because his parents said, oh, we're going to call this thing right here Socrates. They intend to pick out a certain kind of thing, this guy. And then people go, they say, hey, this is Socrates. And then people say, hey, Socrates. And then it gets passed down. We call that guy Socrates. Oh, this guy called Socrates. We say this about him. Oh, that guy's Socrates. And it ends up to me. And then there's this nice chain that traces back to the actual dude. So when I say Socrates, it picks that dude out, refers to him. Because I generally intend to use the words in line with in that tradition. The same with water. So I don't really, so okay, cosmic complement. Would we, now if you don't like the story that I'm telling about how the person intends or something, then you can tell the teleological story about how history selected that it represent this because it's useful and the cosmic complement isn't, and so forth. So I think these kind of considerations can be answered, but I don't know. What do you guys think about this? I don't find them very convincing myself personally.
Classes, everything. You can play the same game. And so what does it mean then? I mean, what's the point of ontology? What's the point of objects, talking about them? What's the point of quantification, bound variables? And my answer is it introduces structure into the overall scientific theory. And that structure in the scientific theory is needed for the logical structure in order that the scientific theory imply observation sentences. And it's important now, observation sentences, not observation terms, because terms, that's a question of denoting objects. Yeah. But observation sentences as wholes, which are conditioned to sensory input, and stay put, no matter how we reinterpret terms or values of variables. So when you consider the triviality of this little argument about cosmic complement, it's puzzling why people, including me, in the old days when I thought of ontology as being really the very heart and core of philosophy, why they take questions of identity of objects so seriously.
What would you say?
I mean, that's such a strange thing to say, I think. So he's saying kind of he changed his mind from his earlier views, right? Because he used to take ontology very seriously. I wonder how early, he's not talking about on what there is, right? He didn't take it very seriously there, like the heart of philosophy is doing that. Or maybe he did, because the heart of philosophy is like giving a kind of formal representation of the sciences, and then you know what the sciences claim exists and stuff. Maybe that's what he's saying. I don't know. Anyway, so that's interesting. Why do we take objects so seriously? Because our experience presents us with objects. Now, of course, they're going to say, no, we structured, the experience doesn't present us that way. We structured the experience. And if so, I guess Kant, I would say, aside on Kant's side, we can't help but do it that way. But I don't know. I remember when I first was introduced to all this. Like, so remember, I sort of knew who Quine was, and taught by people influenced by him. But I never really read Quine until graduate school. And I don't think I really read seriously Quine until I got to, when I went to the University of Connecticut and had a class with Austin Clarke. And we were reading a bunch of Quine. It was a class on objects and this whole stuff about, is reality, are there objects out there independently of minds, or does somehow our categorization and the way we think about the world, bring these things into existence, that they don't exist otherwise, that everything is sort of socially constructed, mind dependent in terms of categorization, how you divide the world up. And I was always very resistant to that. And so I thought, all of these examples here, I could say things that are, misleading but true, Okay. Um, suppose someone asked me, how are these philosophical reaction videos coming? And I say, some people like them. And they say, oh, cool. Now, of course, what if there's only one person that likes them? Well, in logic, some means at least one. So I could get away with saying that. And I wouldn't technically have lied or said something false. But the person probably doesn't understand me as meaning at least one. When we say some, we mean, a few or something like that. More than one, probably. So did I say something true? Yeah. Did I say something misleading? Possibly. Is it the best way to put what I was trying to say? No. Could something be like that be going on with these other ways of describing reality that, yeah, they may be true, technically speaking, but they may not be the best way of putting things, so to speak. This is, at the time, I was calling this sensory pragmatics. They're phenomenal was my catchphrase. So the idea was that, yeah, Quine might be right, that there are different ways of carving up the world, and we can't say really what the best way of doing it, because there are different ways of doing it, and blah, blah, blah. And maybe so ontology doesn't matter as much as we thought it did. So that's his argument. I was like, yeah, there may be different ways of doing it, but there's still a right way of doing it, a way that gets it maximally correct. There may be other ways that are like truth functionally equivalent, but that don't really, that are misleading in a sense. So if you don't represent like a tree and the number 7 as being distinct, or as being, if you think of them as one object, which some you could do if you want to arbitrarily think of, myriad arbitrary sums of things can be objects themselves. Well, if you represent the world that way, I think you're representing it in a misleading way. It may actually be accurate because blah blah blah, but not as accurate as representing them as distinct. Anyway, that's my take. But let's hear what they're saying.
An objector who maintained that this thesis of the inscrutability of reference, or indeterminacy of reference, isn't so much trivially true as trivially false, on the ground that it is trivially true that, for example, the word quine refers to quine, and that is perfectly determinate.
Yeah, right. Hold on here. What is Paul saying? Is he saying that this is a contradiction in Quine's own view, or is he saying someone might say this? What did he say at the beginning? Hold on.
That, for example, what would you say to an objector who...
Oh, I see. What would you say to an objector? Yeah, I would say something like what Paul's about to say. Of course, it's clear that Quine refers to Quine. I don't know. I kind of have a split view about the difference between the way the word functions as opposed to the way the item and thought functions. But let's not get distracted by that.
That this thesis of the inscrutability of reference, or indeterminacy of reference, isn't so much trivially true as trivially false, on the ground that it is trivially true that, for example, the word quine refers to quine, and that...
Yeah, see, Paul said Quine, the word Quine refers to the guy, Quine. Quine's view about the word is something that I would endorse, I think. I think he's going to say it's a description. It's not a referring term. It's not a constant. In logic, it gets translated as a description. There is an X such that X is the author of Word and Object, and a very famous American philosopher who taught at Harvard. Blah, blah, bleedy, 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 blah, blah, blah. And this guy sitting right there happens to be the person who satisfies that description. Therefore, he's picked out by the name Quine, the word Quine. So I think that Quine's view is that the description theory of names is true, and I would endorse that insofar as it goes for words, except my view is the more kind of in line with people like Ken Bach, who think that the description is just like very minimal. So the name Quine describes the person as having that name, basically. But anyway, so I think that's what Quine's going to say. And that's very different than me. So what I would say is the mental item that I token when I think of the thought, not when I say the sentence, but when I think the thought, Quine is an American philosopher, whatever in my mind is the Quine part of that thought directly picks out Quine because of historical relationships that I've had teachers who have studied with him. I've never met the guy. He was, died in the year 2000, so I never met him. But I didn't know people who hung out with him at that time. But I know people who had studied with them and have known them in their life, so that when I say the word Quine, it can refer back to him because I use the word in the way that they tend to. So I would say my thought refers to that guy right there. But the word has this descriptive content. So I would want to split the two. But of course, I think Quine's just going to say they're all descriptive.
That is perfectly determinate and just as obvious as the analogous statement that you talked about earlier when we were talking about truth, namely that the sentence "snow is white" is true if and only if snow is white.
Yeah, see, so that question right there that Paul just asked, that's the sort of thing that was, it's exactly that sort of thing that was bothering me. I think maybe that was bothering me last time when I was saying I don't understand how the T schema doesn't just mean correspondence, because it gives you reference already. Like Quine is an American philosopher is true, just in case Quine is an American philosopher, that is true, unquote. Right? Right? Is that where he's going with this? I got the hiccups now. Fucking Quine, you gave me the goddamn fucking hiccups. Oh, man.
Yes, good. All right, now let's take that example.
Okay, good. Let's do it.
Here we're reinterpreting all singular terms, all general terms, all verbs, and so on, systematically, say by cosmic complement again, so that word in quotation marks, Quine, that denotes my cosmic complement under the reinterpretation. We're reinterpreting that word, and also we're reinterpreting the word in the rest of the sentence after denotes or designates, likewise to refer to my cosmic complement.
Right, so the cosmic complement of Quine refers to the cosmic complement of Quine, is what he's going to say, is how you preserve that. But I don't really buy that cosmic complement argument anyway, so I would, anyway, okay, I see what he's saying now.
There is this, perhaps there's this point, perhaps I should try to clarify a little. That must cause some puzzlement. When I talk about cosmic complement of Quine, cosmic complement of a cat, or whatever, you're understanding me only because you understand the three words, cosmic, complement, and cat. And so you're still there using them as words. So what you have to think of in that phrase, cosmic complement of, you have to think of them as hyphenated words. These are just the component syllables now of the word, and not denotative words in turn. Because what
otherwise you get
I'm trying to convey here is not a reformulation of the language, but a conceptual reinterpretation of putting the whole thing now in the dangerously mentalistic way of your conceptual interpretation of these words. The written sentences stay unchanged.
The written sentences, which are sentences about reference, so sentences such as the word Quine refers to Quine, remains determinately true.
That's right.
And it's unclear then exactly how the thesis of that reference is indeterminate is to be articulated, since
Well,
it seems as if we're...
Well, yeah. So I think, yeah. So Quine is answering, because he's still talking about this cosmic complement thing. He's answering a slightly different question, I think, than the one that Paul is trying to ask here. So, Quine is saying, look, sentences about truth themselves are susceptible to this argument of mine. And Paul is saying, yeah, but if the sentence is true, then doesn't that mean it picks out the object? So even if you do the cosmic complement thing, isn't it true that in that interpretation, the cosmic complement of Quine, in quotes, refers to the cosmic complement of Quine, right? Is that a way of reinterpreting Paul's question here? So it's like, okay, so even if you grant Quine this point about reinterpreting and leaving all the sentences the same, so that the sentence that you're looking at says, Quine is a philosopher is true if and only if Quine is a philosopher, without quotes on the other side. So Quine is saying you reinterpret that sentence, and what it says now is the words are the same, but conceptually now what it means is the cosmic complement of Quine is a cosmic complement of a philosopher if and only if the cosmic complement of Quine is a cosmic complement of a philosopher, without quotes. But Paul's question could still be, yeah, but you got reference there, right? It's scrutable. I hate that word scrutable, by the way. It's scrutable. You know what it refers to. It's not, you can't play those kind of indeterminacy games. So even if you grant Quine's point, don't you still get a version of the question here? Also, am I ever going to make it through this whole conversation? We're only an hour and 16. Still 50 minutes, 2 hours and 6 minutes.
That there are claims about reference that are determinately correct.
But it leaves the question open that it refers to Quine in what sense of Quine?
Yeah, that's the
And in what
obvious
sense it
response.
refers?
So that's the obvious response. Is it him being wholly present? Is it a temporal slice of him? So depending on your metaphysics about the nature of time, some people think, Kripke's given an argument for this actually against four-dimensionalism, that the objects aren't spread out in time, so that your past self doesn't exist. Your past self doesn't exist. Now, obviously, everyone agrees my past self doesn't exist right now, but some people want to say my past self exists back then. Just not now, but then. Treat time as another dimension in essence. That's sometimes called four-dimensionalism. So Quine here seems to be suggesting that, yeah, okay, so you can pick out different senses metaphysically of what I am. Kripke's response to this kind of line has always been, well, you just single out the individual. That's what you're talking about, whatever they are. And then think about what might happen to them. You just stipulate, I mean that guy. So these kind of questions are not relevant. But Quine's here is going to say, look, this is the Galvagai move. It could be temporal slice. It could be wholly present thing. It could be something else. Undetached Quine parts. Yeah, I think that's where he's going with this.
Yes, and perhaps worst of all, in what sense of sense, which is something I'm not quite clear on myself.
What sense of it?
And in the history of philosophy, one
Well,
long...
what just happened right there? Maybe that's a good place to stop since they seem to have taken a break. Wow, super fun though. Okay, so I am going to make it through the rest of that video, but later.